Hello, and welcome to Conquering Finale. My name is Jason Lafredo, and this is a subscriber request. Today's request comes from Barry Nitikman, who wants to know how to give tacit indications to orchestral players during a solo instrument's cadenza. It's a great question with multiple answers depending on what the cadenza looks like, what exactly you want to see in the instrumental parts, and even then there's multiple ways to do this. So I think I've come up with sort of a novel solution that I think Barry and many Finale users will appreciate. So thanks, Barry, for the request. Before I get into that, I just want to show you how you can submit a request for a video. First of all, you must be a subscriber, so click the subscribe button on YouTube and/or sign up for the mailing list by clicking this link on the website. Then just send me an email with your request. Lastly, if your request makes it to video, please do your best to donate to the cause whatever you can. It would be most appreciated. More details can be found following the link in the description below or directly on the subscriber request page of my website. Now, let me show you a few ways to do these tacets under the cadenzas. You can see what I have set up here, this clarinet solo with a string quartet accompaniment, and already in the fifth measure I've sort of set up this cadenza. Now if you're familiar with how to do this in Finale, you know that basically what you do is just you create a long time signature to achieve this. In this case it's 14/4, with the more options set to use a different time signature for display. In this case, make sure it's the same as the piece itself, so 4/4, and this will prevent the 14/4 or the 4/4 from redisplaying in that fifth measure, right? So that's how you do this, and easy enough. You get a bar rest in your resting instruments, which is kind of what you want to see. You want to see a bar rest with a fermata. Of course, we may know that with a default whole rest, you can't actually put a fermata on a default whole rest, so you have to do this in a couple different ways, and really, in my opinion, the best way to do it is actually change it to a real whole rest. And of course, the best way to do that is through plugins, Note, Beam, and Rest, change to real whole rest, and it'll appear that nothing happened, but indeed these are changed to real whole rest, which means that you can now actually put fermatas on them. So that's really the easy version of this. It's one measure, so you've set it up right. We can also put in our text here, so let's just call this clarinet cadenza, or you can say tacit for clarinet cadenza, whatever you want to do. Assign, let's just put it below the staff here and apply it to the string parts there. And of course we only want to show this on the parts probably, so we can always right click, go to edit expression, and where it says show on, just make sure it says parts only. And then you'd have to do that one at a time, but there's a couple different ways to do these, several at a time. There's a JW plugins, JW Change will do this, but there's also some new RGP Lua scripts that'll do this. So if you're into the RGP Lua world, you can choose RGP Lua, and I think there's one called Expressions set to parts only. And it basically does the same thing except all at once. And indeed, if we go into our violin part, we'll see that the clarinet cadenza text is actually showing. We have our bar rest, so we're all good to go. So in this instance, it's fairly easy for this single measure cadenza. That's how you would do it. Now it gets a little bit more complicated in the second scenario. Now this is the exact same cadenza. I've just divided it into multi-measures, and you'll probably guess how I did this. This is actually 4 different measures with different time signatures. There's 9/8, 4/4, 7/8, and 4/8. And again, the same trick with the more options so that you're not actually seeing the 4/4 time signature. Now, I know many of you are going to be saying, well, there's another way to do this where you can actually just do it this way as one measure and then insert the dashed bar lines as expressions. Yes, that is legitimately a way to do it. However, if this cadenza were to go on, it doesn't in this particular case, but if it were to go on for more measures, and it would go on to the second, third, or maybe a fourth system, there is no choice. You have to use multiple measures. You really can't split up a single measure like that. I mean, there's a way in Finale, but it's so buggy. You really don't do it that way. So in this case, I'm kind of just illustrating this to prove a point that this can be done in a different way if this were multiple measures. Okay, so that's kind of what's going on here. So yes, I understand that you can do the dashed bar lines with expressions, but for purposes of this demonstration, I'm going to do it like this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the staff tool, and what I'm going to try and do is select everything except maybe the very last piece of the very last measure. It'll become clear why I'm doing that in a second. And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to define a new staff style. And I'm going to call new, we're going to call this empty for cadenza. Let's just call it that, okay? And the things I want to do with this staff style is I want it to not display rests and empty measures, so we're just going to uncheck that. And I also want to not display bar lines. So just those two things, uncheck those two boxes, and that's all you need to do, okay, and then define or apply. You could apply it to score and parts, but let's just do it to the current score for a second. Empty for cadenza, and we just blanked out that so it looks like one measure, right? Now the reason why I didn't go all the way to the end is because if I did apply it here, I'll just show you this real quick. You'll see that it will actually get rid of that bar line, which we didn't want to do. So if you just don't select the very end of it, you'll still be able to see that last bar line, okay? And now, of course, we have to somehow put in the empty rest with the fermata in the middle of this system. I'm going to come back to this, but I want to go to the part before we do to show you how to do this in the part in a very interesting and unique way. And I think it's a way that might end up being a little bit more stable. What we're actually going to do is we're going to create a multi-measure rest out of this, right? So just multi-measure rest create. And I should say, before you even do any of this, what you really need to do is go into the document options under multi-measure rests and make sure that you uncheck update automatically. If you don't do this, everything that you do in the part is going to get undone when you leave the part and come back. So make sure that that option is unchecked before you do any of this, all right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to edit this multi-measure rest. And we're going to get to this multi-measure rest editor. And I'm going to do a few things. The first thing is I'm actually going to get rid of the number. So start numbering at, it's 2 currently, but if you actually put this at like a really high number, say 1,000, it won't start putting numbers in here until there's 1,000 measures here, which is obviously way too big, and you'll just get a blank H bar. All right, that's sort of step 1. Let's go back and edit this again. The next thing I'm going to do is, this is the kind of unique part about this, is I'm going to choose a different shape for the multi-measure rest. So I'm going to select this. We're going to get to the shape selection dialog box. You can see the H bar is selected there, but I'm going to create a brand new one, which gets us to the dreaded shape designer. And just bear with me as I show you how to do this. We're going to show the staff template because that's going to be really helpful. It's also helpful to be at a large zoom. 400 is probably ideal for this. And what we're going to do is actually put in some text characters. So select the text tool here. And before you click anywhere, make sure that you have the right font selected. So go to the Shape Designer menu, select font. And what you want to do is choose your music font. In this case, well, it was already chosen for me, but normally your text font would be chosen here by default. So for me, it's Finale Maestro, and make sure that the size is 24, because Finale is 24 points for music characters, right? So this is set up for me anyway. And then once you have that set up, just click in here, and we're going to insert a symbol. Now, in the Shape Designer, we do have this menu item here, Insert Symbol. It does have the shortcut Command-Shift-Option-S, and I've found for some reason this is slightly buggy in Finale, that sometimes just from here, triggering that doesn't actually work, but it always works if you choose it from the menu. So in this case, I'm just going to choose Insert Symbol here. And this is a Smufel font, so in 27 you'll get this nice little browser over here. So I'm going to find rests, and we're going to try find the 4th one here, which is the whole rest. I should point out that, you know, in a previous version of Finale, if you're not using Smufel, this is going to be a little bit trickier because you're going to have to figure out how to access these characters in a little bit different way. By either typing them, or I think you can come into this insert symbol selection dialog box anyway and just finding it, but you don't get the categories over here. So it's a little bit trickier in the previous version of Finale, but anyway. So we select that, that whole rest, and then I'm going to go back to my selection tool, and I'm just going to kind of drag it into place where it should be, making sure that it's centered on this line. That's important. All right, so that's where it should go. And then I can actually add the fermata as well. So we're going to do the same thing. Go back to the text tool, just click in there, insert symbol, and in the Smufel spec, this is in the holds category, holds and pauses. And it's the very first one. Just choose the fermata there, select, and again, same thing, choose a selection tool and very carefully drag that into place. And then when you do this, it's usually a good idea to group these items. So if you just kind of drag and select To select both of them there, you just choose group, right? And then they can move together all at once. Now, what's tricky here is with the H bars in the multi-measure rest, there's a little bit of an offset for the H bar. I don't quite know why. It just has to do with the way that Finale was built and how it handles those H bars. So if you actually leave it like this in the correct place, it's actually going to show up too low. So what you actually have to do is move this up to a spot where it would be if it was on the first ledger line, if the whole rest was on the first ledger line. You're kind of eyeballing it a little bit, but I think somewhere right around there should be good. We'll see how good I did. Click OK. And now choose this one. So now we're choosing rest shape 149 instead of 50. Now, also in Finale 27.2, they gave you this extra option, stretch horizontally. It's important to uncheck this. If you don't have version 27, again, this whole process is a little bit trickier. There's another way to do it, and I'm going to show you kind of how to do that in the score, because we have to do it differently in the score anyway. But what I'm going to show you, the process for doing it in the score can be applied in the parts as well. So just stick with me a second. But so this is how we're going to set up our multi-measure rest, shape 149, uncheck this, starting number at 1,000, and we click OK. And just like that, basically what I've done is I've created a multi-measure rest that looks like a bar rest with a fermata. And I was pretty darn close on that whole rest, right? Actually, I think that's perfect. Yeah, so there you go. So this is tricky because it looks like a single bar, but this is actually 4 bars combined together as a multi-measure rest. So that's kind of the trick to it. The nice thing about this and why I like this method is because the position of this is really stable within this measure. In other words, if I were to put more measures on the system, that will stay centered, it will look perfect, even as if it was just a regular measure, with the bar rest and the fermata. So that's kind of why I like this method in using the multi-measure rest. And of course, you do have to repeat this for all of your instruments. So I'm just going to use some of my shortcuts to get there. Again, it's 149, uncheck, 1,000, next part, edit, 149, uncheck, 1,000, cello part, create, edit, 149, 1,000, and we're good to go. And so now in the cello part, in the viola and the other string parts, we have the same exact thing. Now again, just wanted to reiterate that it's very important to keep this option unchecked, update automatically. If you don't do that, every time you navigate back to this part, it's going to go back to looking like a normal multi-measure rest with the H bar and the number. All right. So that's how you would do this in the parts. So let's go deal with the score. Which you can't do the same way because you can't actually create multi-measure rests when there's music somewhere else in the same system, right? That's kind of just a limitation of Finale, I guess. I mean, you shouldn't really do that anyway. So we are going to have to do this a little bit differently. And I think the clever thing here is that I'm going to actually use an expression for this, which is, again, I'm doing this as an expression. You could do this in the parts as well in previous versions of Finale. So if you're paying attention here, you can apply this to the parts. So what I'm going to do here is I'm actually going to attach an expression to the end of this. If I attach it to the beginning, then it's going to show in the parts. So if we attach it to the end, it'll work better. So I'm going to attach to the end here. I'm going to create a new technique text. And basically what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a shape, uncheck allow horizontal stretching, of course, and press select. And because this shape library is the same across all the tools, you'll find that shape that you just created. So here it is, number 149 with the whole rest and the fermata, and select that. And then we're going to do something unique with positioning. I'm just going to uncheck use technique text category positioning. I'm going to center this. I'm going to put it on the left bar line. And then vertical alignment, I want to make sure that we're going off the staff reference line. And if you remember, I had to do that weird offset, which goes up to the first ledger line above the staff. So you actually have to undo that in the expression designer here because of the way that it references the staff, the top staff line here. So the best way to do this actually is to use the spacing unit here, and the quick way to do that is, in this case, it's -2s will stand for spacing, and this way you don't have to calculate the inches and all that stuff. So just put -2s and click OK, and basically what that will do is it'll put it in the correct spot, right? And then of course I can duplicate that into the other parts. And then the trick here is just grab that handle with the Option key held down and just drag it to somewhere in the center of the system. All right, so that would be how you would do it here, right? Remember, we've already emptied out these measures of the bar lines using the staff style and also the default hole rest. So now, like I said, you can do this the same way in the parts. Actually, if you attach this to the first measure, you can even create a multi-measure rest that's blank in the parts and use the expression attached to the first measure. It just gets a little bit fiddly because the positions are going to be different between the score and parts, but it's not that big of a deal. You know, when you move things in the parts, it'll just turn to orange and it's all good. It's just, I just think it's just slightly easier to do it this way with the multi-measure rests in the parts. It's kind of a nifty little hack. All right. And then I just wanted to show you one more sort of variation of this. I have the same exact thing, except in this case, I put in the clarinet cues for the instruments here. Now, again, in this case, you don't want to show the cue actually in the score. You only want to show it in the parts. So what I can do here is actually go in here and basically do that same staff style that I had before. Apply to current part and score. We'll choose the empty for cadenza. And then what I can also do here is with these measures, let's create a new staff style that's going to be blank and empty for cues. There is a blank notation staff style, but there's one thing that it doesn't do that you need to do in this particular case. Empty for cues, we'll do the same thing. Don't display rests. In this case, I want the bar line there because it's it's at the end. I want to set the alternate notation to blank notation. However, the one extra thing I need to do here is actually not show the clefs because you see the clef changes here. So I'll also uncheck the clefs option, and I believe if I did that right, apply to current part score, empty for cues. There you go. I can also make it not show expressions by going in here and make sure that expressions is unchecked everywhere. There we go. That should do it. There we go. Although we're still showing the cautionary clefs, so we can always hide them here in the measure attributes. There we go. Now we're talking. See, it's a little bit trickier when you have cues there. And basically we do the same thing. Although in this case, because I'm hiding expressions over here, maybe I need to attach it here. There we go. Sorry if you feel like I'm rushing through this, but I'm hoping that you're all following me, getting the gist of this. And then we can go into the parts and basically do the same thing, right? So create the multi-measure rest, do this 149, 1000, right? And we're pretty close. The only thing that's left here is the dash bar line, which you may or may not want to see. Depending on what you want to do here. This exists in the clarinet part, so maybe you do want to show it in the string parts, but you could also use that same staff style that we had set up before. Apply to current part score. We can choose that empty for cadenza because that will actually hide the bar line there. So now we've got something that looks like this. And again, choose your clarinet cadenza and put it in place, and you're good to go. So, a lot of different things that I'm showing you here, but I think, hopefully this is making sense. We can actually make this a little bit wider. There we go. All right, so that was my interesting method for setting this up. I'm using multi-measure rests to show with a shape to show the fermata on the whole rest. So it's an interesting solution, I think. One other thing I might want to point out is that you'll notice that my measure numbers are going from 10 to 11 here, even though this is actually 4 different measures, 10, 11, 12, 13, 11. What I did ahead of time to set this up is if you go into the measure attributes for these measures, so you see in measure 10, you have include in measuring numbering, but for measures 11, 12, and 13, I've unchecked the option for include in measure numbering, right? I didn't do that over here, so you're seeing it go from 14 to 18. But again, if you just select these 3 measures and choose measure attributes, it'll change for 19 through 21. Just uncheck include in measuring numbering, and then you'll get your measure number going from 14 to 15, which is probably a better way to view it, right? Oops, these aren't centered, it's bugging me. There we go. So if you're dealing with measure numbers, just be cautious of that as well. All right, so I know I was going a little bit fast. I was covering a lot. Hopefully this has given you some ideas. And, once again, thanks, Barry, for suggesting this. It's an interesting little challenge in Finale to create these, but I think my method of doing these with multi-measure rests is kind of clever. Hopefully somebody will find that clever as well. And like I said, there's other ways to do that. You can always use the expressions for both the score and the parts. Again, you could use expressions for the dashed bar lines instead. There's a lot of ways to do this, but this was just an interesting solution that I found when Barry requested this. So there you go. Once again, thanks for watching. If you have something that you would like to see me do, you can certainly send your own subscriber request. Just send me an email and I will take a look at it. And if it's something that I haven't covered in the series already, I will certainly take a look at doing that. So awesome. So once again, thanks, Barry, for the suggestion. Thanks, everyone, for watching. As always, please don't forget to subscribe if you haven't done so. And I will see you soon on the next video.